started this. Well, we did this for Arrowhead Addict last year, but I don't write for Arrowhead Addict anymore. So this is actually our second episode with this new site. So
Okay.
yeah, we just he and I are just getting going. But we did it almost the whole season last year for what we called AA Radio for Arrowhead Addict. So
Sure, I'm with you. I'm with you. That sounds good to me, man.
all right, here we go. So we are going live in 3, 2, 1. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Chiefs fans. Welcome to Chiefs Central Radio on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I am your host of Chiefs Central Radio, Jason Seibel, and with me, as always, as we move into the Chiefs' dark days of vacation time before preseason officially starts, is my co-host, as always, Chris Kilduff. What's up, Duff?
Man, not much. Just kind of waiting, man. I hate this kind of slow period right before you get into the preseason. Kind of no news. So I'm excited for training camp. Excited for that preseason. Kind of jumping into the season here.
Yeah, it is the dark days of football right now. Minicamp is over, OTAs are over, the teams have been released, the locker rooms are cleared out, and it's vacation time right up until the end of next month when training camp resumes. But we are not out of that mode just yet. We actually have a very special guest and a very special treat for you Chiefs fans on Chiefs Central Radio this week. From the Kansas City Star, Chiefs beat reporter Terez Paylor is with us this week on Chiefs Central Radio. What's up, buddy?
Hey, how you guys doing, man? It's a pleasure being on this thing. This is maybe my second time doing a Google Hangout, so we'll see how it goes this time.
Well, so far so good. We got audio, we got video, man. We can see you and talk to you. So, Terez, we're so happy to have you here. Obviously, you cover the Chiefs. It's what you do for a living. So we kind of just wanted to pick your brain. Kind of give us a wrap-up of minicamp as it just wrapped up. What were some of the highlights, lowlights? What was some of the stuff that you saw?
Well, I think the first thing that you got to say, it's hard to tell much of anything because you don't have pads on. You know, this is a game played in pads, so we're not going to really know if any of these guys can play. Any of these young guys that just can play till the pads come on. But OTAs are good because you get to kind of do the eye test. You get to see how a guy moves. You get to see how they look in space. You get to see if they can make the plays they're supposed to make when there's no threat of being hit. And there were some real standouts, I thought, in the 4-week OTA, man. I thought in the 10 practices we got to 13 practices, excuse me. I thought we saw some pretty interesting guys. Let me just run through them. First guy that comes to mind is Demetrius Harris, second-year tight end, former basketball player, 6'7", big guy. He's got a great catch radius. I think his hands need to continue to develop. It's not like he has bad hands. He can catch the ball. He makes spectacular catches, but then he drops some he should. So that's a focus thing. That comes with time. That'll come as he develops. He's gained 30 pounds since last year, so that should help him block too. But as we know, it'll be interesting to see how he does when the threat of being hit is introduced to the play. Yeah, he was really like the big standout that we all saw in all the OTA practices. I thought Sanders Cummings is interesting. Second-year safety who had pretty much his rookie year wiped out due to injury. I mean, there were a couple times where he was playing center field and he was able to go to the sideline and get the ball for the interception. He's kind of got some center field skills. Now, he's not a talkative guy. I tried to probe him about it a little bit. He wasn't too interested in getting, into how he does his craft. But watching him play, he's an interesting guy, and I think he's a guy that might make a pretty good pairing with Eric Berry. A little bit there. Those are the two best youngsters I can think of. Outside of that, just thinking about the offense in general, I thought Alex Smith was clearly the top quarterback in the camp. He was better than all of them. All of his backups, he was superior. He was more accurate, he was more decisive, and he's trusted his receivers, namely Dwayne Bowe, who looks like he's in good shape. Those two seem to have kind of a building relationship. Smith is starting to force him the ball, trying to get, help Bowe get his hands on the ball, which is a good thing. I thought Bowe was probably the best-looking receiver, even though some of the young guys and Dressler looked okay, looked kind of interesting. As far as the defense goes, outside of Cummings again, I think those cornerbacks, that's going to have to be a position we take a hard look at. And I know I'm rambling, but I'm trying to give you everything. Ron Parker is a guy I liked last year because he seemed to make plays whenever he got on the field. He got beat a few times in camp, deep, more than a few times. Both him and Cooper did, but both of them made a few plays underneath. Those guys need to continue to develop their technique, but there's some talent there. But I mean, we're just gonna have to see if they develop. I think that's everybody. I'm sure I forgot someone, but hopefully, as we continue to talk, maybe other guys will come on my mind.
Right. Well, you mentioned Demetrius Harris, and we've kind of read a lot about him in this offseason that, he's kind of a favorite of John Dorsey and Andy Reid, even holding over from last year. My big question is, the Chiefs are likely not going to hold more than 3 tight ends on their roster on that 53-man. Yeah. So and that's going to be an interesting position battle, I think, come training camp next month with Kelce coming back healthy. Fasano coming back healthy. You got the beard-less Sean McGrath now, as from what I hear. He doesn't have the beard right now. Yeah. And then Harris and whatever other camp bodies they decide to bring. So, do you think he can be a guy that can compete for that 3rd tight end spot?
Absolutely. Like I said, 6'7", 260 right now with basketball athleticism and the potential to have pretty good hands. This isn't a guy you cut. If he shows any growth, if he shows any growth from last year, you have to hold on to him and see what he's got. The guy who's in trouble is Sean McGrath. But here's the thing. McGrath is pretty reliable. You know what he can do. He's not a great player. He has big, soft, reliable hands. He's going to catch it when you throw it his way. Not a great blocker, but he's reliable. He's a good player, right? Here's the thing. There's a chance all 4 can make it because there's no guarantee Kelce stays healthy. There's no guarantee Fasano stays healthy. And the problem is there's no way if you cut Harris that he makes it to the practice squad. In my opinion, I don't see that happening. Yeah. So we know Andy Reid can use his tight ends, man. It'd be hard to keep all 4, but you might have to because Kelce and Fasano at this point have to be considered injury prone.
Yeah, that's very, very valid. Chris, you got something for him?
Yeah, I think it sounds like he's going to have a good upside. So, I would be totally on board for keeping someone with that kind of athleticism. Hopefully bring him in, especially when we're struggling outside of Jamal Charles to really put up any, that red zone offense, that touchdown. Get him in there, let him use his basketball skills and jump for the ball. So I'd be excited for that.
Yeah, at this point, like you said, you've got so few established weapons. If you've got a guy with a high ceiling like that, you can't afford to get rid of him. Barn, unless he has they could have him, but unless he has a terrible camp, I can't see them cutting him.
And talking about the receiving game too, moving from tight ends to wide receivers. You said Bo showed up in great shape. We've seen the quotes from Andy Reid saying, he looks like he's in great shape. Bo went out of his way, hired a nutritionist and a trainer in the offseason. First time he's done that in his career. Who's setting themselves apart to be that number 2? Because last year it started with Baldwin, and we dumped him for Jenkins. Avery kind of stepped up as the number 2, but never really solidified. Anybody rise above to that number 2 spot yet?
All right, good question. So here's the situation. Donnie Avery is what he is, guys. Got that blazing speed. He's not very consistent. He's going to drop some. He should. He's going to make a few catches. He's going to flash great potential, but he is what he is at this point. Problem is, he's your second best receiver. He just is. I think he's pretty solidly the number 2, for better or worse. I think the leader in the slot position right now is Hemingway. I like Junior Hemingway. Good hands, not terribly explosive, but he's dependable. He runs good routes. And 2 other things that are going to help him make this team. He's cheap. He's still playing on that pitiful rookie deal. And he plays on special teams. He can do anything you ask. Swiss Army knife type guy. Very, very, very helpful when you've only got 53 men on a roster. And only 46 you can dress. So I think he makes a team, and I think right now he's a starter at slot receiver. One guy I'm really interested to take another look at is Weston. I want to see Weston dressed to play in pads. Because here's the thing. I can tell you right now, we saw enough of this guy in OTAs. He's not an outside receiver. He's not that. He doesn't have the kind of long speed, the catch radius, the dynamic playing ability to play outside and beat big corners. He can't do it. But what he can do is he got a great feel, at least in OTAs, he had a great feel for operating underneath as a slot receiver and great quickness too, and reliable hands. So I think that's a guy that's really interesting. And the problem for him is that, again, you only got 453 guys on the roster. It's going to be hard for him to make the roster. It's going to be tough. He's going to have to win the job. He's going to have to beat out Hemingway clearly, and during the preseason, which he might do, but he's got his work cut out for him. You also asked about the outside receivers. Obviously, Dwayne Bowe's the number one guy. I think Avery's the number two guy. A couple guys that stepped up a little bit in camp, Frankie Hammond. Frankie Hammond has some downfield speed. He's a second-year pro from the University of Florida, former top recruit, I believe. He was on the practice squad all of last year, so he's had time to develop and digest the playbook. He showed a little bit of juice. Another receiver, obviously A.J. Jenkins. He was hurt a little bit because of the hamstring injury in OTAs. You would have liked to see him be able to participate for the full 13 practices. Like you wanted to see how he could develop through that. He's gonna have to. I don't want to say catch up in training camp, but he's gonna have to make an impression, more of an impression there than he has there. I think that's about it. I don't think I'm missing anybody. I mean, at this point, I think those are the kind of the main guys in the mix there.
Did you see anything at all from Mark Harrison, who we picked up from New England? Was he out there?
Yeah, we only saw him for a few practices, but he on his first practice he made a great play. I can't remember who he elevated over, but just imagine a long bomb, like a deep pass down the sideline, and Harrison went up and got it over somebody. I think it was Quentin Byrd from Utah State, another newly signed free agent. Actually, they didn't sign him; they brought him in for a trial. But yeah, he went up and got it. He used every bit of his 6'3" frame to go get it. That's the only play I really remember him making, but it was impressive. He showed a little bit of go up and get it.
I've heard a bunch of ramblings with him too, where he's that kind of guy that has the high ceiling and hasn't had a chance to show with the injury last year and stuff like that. And I'm just bound to anybody that New England kind of puts on their register to, hey, we could take this guy and make him a star player. They're so good at that I was kind of excited, hopefully, to kind of see him hopefully emerge a little bit and have some of that big play potential.
Right. I mean, it's so hard to unearth a diamond in the NFL, but to do it, you've kind of got to look at the situation. Like, here's a guy who's talented, and we really don't know how good he is, just because he was hurt all the time. So maybe he does have some juice. We're just gonna have to see.
You mentioned Sanders Cummings, Therese. And you said that he can play safety, and one of the biggest arguments that draft pundits made prior to the draft is the Chiefs had to draft a safety. They had to replace Kendrick Lewis. And kind of the feeling, at least I think from the inside of the organization, was they already had that guy on their roster in Sanders Cummings. He just, like you said, he couldn't show it last year because of the injuries and whatnot. So you think he's that guy? I mean, you think he's that center field guy, still keeping Eric Berry up in the box and letting him play that center field? All
right, put it this way. Like, it's my understanding that they scouted the heck out of cornerbacks and safeties in this draft. Like, just safeties killed him last year. They just did. Outside of Eric Berry, they killed him. But I never thought that they were going to spend a top pick on a safety unless they love Calvin Pryor or HaHa Clinton did, unless they just fell in love with him. Because I know that the front office loves Sanders Cummings. They think he's a great center field. They think he has the potential to be a really good player as a single high safety. If you believe that, you've invested a 5th-round pick in him last year, and you really couldn't see what he could do because of injuries, you kind of got to give him a chance to see what he can do. You can't really invest a high pick in a guy, in a safety, because you've only got so many spots in which they can play.
You mentioned, and I agree with you, I think that they definitely were frustrated by the injuries last year because they thought that he might be the guy last year. But this secondary as a whole, and I'm not just talking the safety position, I'm talking the secondary as a whole, definitely became a liability for this team. I mean, it's easy to say, or it could be said, that they were what caused the Chiefs to not win their first playoff game in 20 years last year, and that monumental collapse in the second half of that game against the Colts, which I just watched again the other night on NFL Replay. I don't know why I put myself through that. But so and going forward now, and we'll kind of shift gears just a little bit, but two guys sat out of OTAs, and that was Justin Houston, who's waiting on a bigger contract, which we'll talk about here in just a second, and then the other guy that sat out up until we found out that he played his last game as a Chief is Brandon Flowers. So now we're a flowerless secondary Thoughts on that? I mean, going forward?
Yeah. First of all, my thoughts on Flowers is that he had a bad year last year, even though he made the Pro Bowl. Like that was a mea culpa for the 4 or 5 years prior, where he's a really good corner and didn't make it. He's a good player still. I don't think he's washed up. I think they let him go because, as somebody who would know told me, he don't like them and they don't like him. It was just one of those kind of deals. You know what I mean?
Really,
Yeah.
that's the first I've heard it. He wasn't buying in.
No, I wouldn't say that. It was just a situation where, like, I wouldn't say he was a problem, because at least with us, he was a professional. He never gave us a hint that there was an issue, and I never heard it from his teammates either. But you know what? That's a prideful guy, man. They asked him to move down into the nickel. He played hurt last year. They asked him to play closer to the action. He's a little guy. Like, this guy wants to live out his contract. And, like, he took a L for the team because they asked him to do it because they like big corners. If he had an issue with that, and he very well may have had it, he never told us, but you hear stuff.
Yeah.
This is not about bashing Brandon Flowers. I think he was a professional, especially in the way he dealt with us, because honestly, whatever issues he had, if he had them, it could have been much uglier, okay? But look, man, it was just a situation where, like, he kind of didn't fit what they did, and more importantly, they needed the money. They had to create the money to re-sign Houston. They had to create the money to re-sign Smith. People who know will tell you that they didn't necessarily need to do it to re-sign Smith, but I think you needed that cushion that releasing Brandon Flowers provided. Now, I also say this, man, I don't think they cut him if he doesn't make, if they didn't stand to gain $7 million in cap. I don't think that's the guy you cut because of your current quarterback situation. Right now, you don't know if Cooper's any good. You don't know if Ron Parker's any good. Sean Smith with the DUI allegedly, and he's a very talented player, but at this point, that he's not. Can you rely on him at this point? Just because of that. I guess what I'm trying to say is the situation's up in the air a little bit. As far as him having a productive year, you draft a third-round corner, Phillip Gaines, who has ability, but guess what? That guy doesn't even look like he's 180 pounds, man. He needs a full offseason to bulk up. The cornerback situation is going to be really interesting this year. It's looking more and more like this team's best chance to get back to the playoffs is going to be 2015.
Yeah, I mean, my big thing is with Flowers was I wasn't surprised because of the money issues and whatnot, but the fact that what's going to kill us with it is, he was definitely the leader in that group.
Yeah.
And so now, we have, like you were saying, so many young, unproven guys that, there's not really kind of that steadfast person that's, going to, be the pillar in that community there. So.
Yeah, I got a sense that Brandon Flowers was pretty well liked by his teammates, man. So maybe he wasn't happy with the way he was used. Maybe both sides were ready to move on, fine. But, like, let it be known, man, that I don't think that dude was necessarily an issue in the locker room. And he certainly didn't. Certainly wasn't enough of an issue where it spilled out into the media. So get a guy credit for that. He was a good chief.
Yeah, he and like I said, that's why when you said that, I was like, wow, that's the first I've heard of that. But you hit the nail on the head that he doesn't fit what Dorsey and Reed are trying to do in regards to those corners. They're after the guys that are over 6 feet, that are pushing 200, which makes me kind of raise my eyebrows at the Phillip Gaines, 180 pounds soaking wet. But he is over 6 feet, so I guess maybe that's what they were looking at.
He's probably exactly 6 feet, but here's what he's got. I think they'll tolerate the 6 foot thing if you've got long arms, and he's got that. So that kind of makes up for it.
So what's your thoughts on Owens then that they picked up in free agency from the Falcons? I had a conversation about him in regards to his size because he is atypical to what they're trying to do, and I think he's smaller than Flowers. He's like 5'9". You think that's their nickel guy, their slot guy?
Yeah, actually I do. I think they basically said, well, this guy can at least give us what Flowers gave us last year in the nickel. I think that's all that was about. Like, he doesn't fit the prototype, but it's a 1-year deal. They got him cheap. He's fast. He's got a bit of a pedigree. I mean, he can play in the league. He's a guy, but he's a guy. But he's a guy you can plug and play and just not get destroyed. I mean, they figured that they could replace what Flowers. In hindsight, it's obvious they figured that he could replace some of what Flowers gave him on the cheap.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, cutting flowers for the money, and they did. They saved about, rough shot about $7.5 million this year, and about another $7.5 million next year. Obviously, the two big contracts hanging over their head. Terez, what are you hearing on the Justin Houston deal? Are you hearing anything?
Well, I think the guy wants his money. I think they're serious about it too, man. I think I don't know if he's going to hold out during training camp, but it wouldn't surprise me if he did. If he did, I think this is a guy who's going to be a first-round pick 3 years ago, and because of one stupid mistake, he cost himself millions of dollars. So after a career year, the burgeoning star in this league, he wants to get paid, and I don't blame him. I don't blame him one bit, man. These players sacrifice so much. They go through so much. They get beat up. This is a business. This is a ruthless business. These guys better get what they can when they get it. So you'll never hear me begrudge a player for trying to get his. I think he's serious about getting his money.
I was going to say, Chris and I discussed this on last week's episode of Chief Central Radio, and we're both with you. I mean, the guy deserves his money. I think the question now is it going to happen before training camp? Do you think the deal gets done before training camp?
Yeah, I don't want to speculate, man. I don't know, but I do think that there's a pretty good chance that he'll get into camp before he misses too much, if he does miss anything. I mean, they can't afford to let this guy just sit out, weeks. I mean, it might stretch into it a little bit, I guess, if he doesn't show up. But I guess at this point, I would say I'd be surprised if they don't come to some sort of agreement.
Yeah, especially since he seems to be a gamer. He seems like somebody that wants to be there and wants to, come in and be that position and, but yeah, like me and Jason said, we just talked about it last week and we're like, if anybody deserves any sort of contract, anything, it's him with the, measly little money he's making for what he's putting together for us.
Yeah, they need him too. So, yeah, I mean, there's a need there. Dorsey and Reed have showed that they'll pay because they paid Bo. If you agree to a deal with Bo, you got to find a way to keep Houston.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
If I'm Justin Houston, there's no way I take a dime less than what Dwayne Bowe got.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see what the deal ends up being. And, of course, the other deal that's on the table right now is this Alex Smith deal. The reports are out there. They've been out there for a while. He wants $126 million over 6 years. And, Jay Cutler getting the deal he got doesn't help. Colin Kaepernick getting that monster deal he just got doesn't help. Thoughts on that? Rumblings? What are you hearing on that one?
Well, I mean, the Smith deal is interesting because that's another guy the Chiefs need to sign because they gave up 2 picks for him. Can't let that guy walk. I think Houston's got to be the priority, though, because he's younger. Because Andy Reid has shown that he can make almost any quarterback look decent. So Houston has to be the priority, but you can't let Smith walk either. You just can't do it. As far as that goes, I can't imagine Tom Condon will let Alex Smith sign whatever the similar kind of deal to Colin Kaepernick, which is very team friendly despite the money. Tom Condon, that's not his game, man. I'd be shocked if he lets that happen. He's gonna fight for a little more as far as protection for his client than Kaepernick got. As far as when that'll happen, I'm not sure. I do think both sides want to come to some sort of agreement. We know Alex isn't gonna hold out. He's gonna show up, be a good soldier, and all that. So, you know what, man? We're just gonna have to see. I think the Chiefs have shown that by letting all those guys walk this offseason, they are willing to dig in their heels. But at the end of the day, this is a business, and they gotta get both those guys signed.
Yeah,
you pay your best players. Period.
Exactly. If you have any hope of performing this year, I think that they showed last year, they being Dorsey and Reed, that they're not necessarily considering this a rebuilding project, although they have done some serious roster modifications. But yeah, I mean, you gotta pay who you got. Terez, you got your rooms booked in St. Joe for next month?
Yeah, I actually need to get on that, but I'm looking forward to it. It should be fun. I mean, it's kind of football paradise except for the heat. You get to watch. God, what is it, 3 straight weeks of football? It's gonna be pretty awesome. So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I'm actually making my first trip to Chiefs camp this year. My wife and I live down in San Antonio, Texas, so my wife and I and the girls will be driving up for the family day. We'll be there Friday afternoon and be there all day Saturday on the family day and head out Sunday. So looking forward to maybe meeting you face to face and chatting with you again.
Sure, thanks guys. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much to Terrace Paler from the Kansas City Star for joining us this week on Chief Central Radio. Terrace, it's been a pleasure. Love to have you on again sometime as we move into the season, buddy.
Sure, man. I got you, man.
All right, take care, bud.
I take it.
All right, good stuff there from Kansas City Star Chiefs reporter Terrace Paler. Chris, thoughts?
Man, it was nice. It's nice getting that inside information because you can, like with me, I get to go on and I read the little tidbits that they put out every day when the mini camps and training camps and stuff like that. And man, it's sure just awesome being able to hear kind of firsthand accounts of players that are looking good, people making big plays, and kind of giving you a little bit of insight to what they have going on.
He talked about receivers, and it's Weston Dressler, and I hadn't heard a whole lot. I mean, obviously the guy's coming out of Canada. He's been playing with the I think the Saskatchewan Roughriders for the last 6 years or something. So this guy is far from a rookie, but he's a rookie to the NFL. And this is another guy, John Dorsey, going out and into the most unusual places and finding this dude. And of course, he's a small white receiver, and I only say that because he draws comparison to Wes Welker, as small white receivers are prone to do. Devin Wiley was another one that the Chiefs drafted a few years ago. He's going to be the next Wes Welker, and Weston Dressler drew the same comparisons this year, fairly or unfairly. But I'll be interested to see, hearing Terrace talk about him and what he was able to do with his quickness. So.
Yeah, it's interesting, when you have someone like that, just because they've been able to do big things at that Canadian League level, but it's always so interesting to see someone in the NFL with the higher competition and defenses and schemes and stuff like that causing such a difference. When you're actually playing in the NFL, so hopefully it can cross over a little bit and he can kind of be that inside seam guy to run those quick inside routes or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's pause for a second. Do you happen to have the email pulled up of the original?
I have a guideline that I have. We want to talk about most needed position group. You said that needs to improve.
Oh, improve. Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
Jamal Charles. You wanted to talk about him having as good a year as he did the last 2 years.
Okay. All right.
And let's Kansas City number 2, and then training camp, which we kind of went over with Terrence.
Kansas City number 2.
Second wide receiver.
Oh yeah.
Kansas City number 2.
Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about let's do the position groups. I'll edit this back together. I don't have it pulled up because I'm logged in under the radio login,
yeah.
And so I was just
I have a little notepad with notes. So
shit. What else are we talking about? All right. Okay, Chris. So yeah, the next thing we wanted to talk about really, and we kind of touched on it a little bit with Terrace, but what's your take on what do you think the biggest improvement needs to come from the Chiefs? What position group do you think needs to make the biggest improvement this year over last year?
Well, I kind of agree with Terrence. I had it written down to talk about anyways, and he kind of really seemed to touch on it. The most important thing that we really have to do is lock up these positions and battles and personnel for our secondary. You could see even with the mediocre offense that we had in the first half of the season when we went 9-0, our defense, if they could play at that kind of level, our offense could even be mediocre and we can still go 9-0. So if we can get that secondary to perform at that level and have those guys really push on, I think that's the most important. We have some real playmakers there. We got to see Eric Berry in the Pro Bowl. 4 tackles, he had the interception, the fumble. He looked like that star standout player that we know he is. So we need him to come back and do big things. And then the big thing that Terrence kind of talked about, I felt trying to find that free safety replacement. I think that's a big one, whether or not it's going to be Cummings, like he said, if they're going to try and play around and move around some of these corners, like, Abdullah and some of those guys, trying to kind of find those young DBs, Marcus Cooper and Philip Gaines that we have, and try and get them to really solidify where they're going to play.
Yeah, I think, that obviously the secondary, and he alluded to, that position alone may keep the Chiefs out of the playoffs this year, which I think this is going to be a very confusing year for Chiefs fans. I've heard that, I've said it before, because after the success from last year, the 11-5 season and whatnot, I do, and it's going to be tough. And I mean, they may steal one or two, and they may surprise us all, but I honestly think that the group that's going to have to make the biggest bound, the biggest improvement, is the receiving. The Chiefs were almost dead last year, if not dead last, in receivers overall in regards to yards and touchdowns. Obviously, their number one receiver last year was Jamal Charles.
Especially if you take Charles out of the equation, then it was really bad.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm talking about guys with a WR next to their name on the program. You know what I mean? They've got to figure out a way, and it sounds like they're getting there in camp. Of course, OTAs and camp, we always get these stories of these acrobatic, John Baldwin is a perfect example. That guy was an all-pro wide receiver in training camp and OTAs. But when it came to production on the field, he didn't have anything. And, so you got to kind of, at least I've come to the conclusion, I have to kind of take that kind of stuff with a grain of salt, where it is what it is in OTAs and training camp, and the proof is on the field. But I think these receivers, and listening to Tara's talk and what I've read, guys like Donnie Avery, he's got blazing speed, but he drops as many as he catches. AJ Jenkins, former first round pick, has got to figure out a way to live up to that pedigree. Junior Hemingway is intriguing, and it really kind of excites me because he catches everything that's thrown in his direction. And I think that that's really important when you're in an offense like the Chiefs are in, and you have a quarterback that's going to be as consistent and as accurate as Alex Smith is, that when he puts that ball where it's supposed to be, you need to catch it. And that's one thing about Junior Hemingway that I really, really, really like.
Yeah, I love Junior Hemingway too. I thought he, the times that we did get to see some of him last year, I thought he looked really good. I think a lot of this too is going to come in place on Alex Smith getting more comfortable too. You could tell by the end of the year he wasn't so scared to take some more risks with the ball. So, if he's in there, like they're saying with Dwayne Bowe, where they're, he's really trying to force it in a little bit more and get Dwayne Bowe, some better looks and make, and believe that Dwayne Bowe will fight for the ball, then I think it's going to allow someone with the physical stature of Bowe to go and make those plays. Junior Hemingway's that same kind of thing. It looks like he has some pretty good physicality. You don't want to do that with some of the tall guys. You don't want Donnie Avery fighting for the ball. That's not the wide receiver you want to do that with. But some of those bigger guys, especially with our tight ends, having healthy tight ends this year. We got a good series of kind of big, bulked out tight ends that can go up and get the ball. So if Alex Smith is more comfortable at making, by all means, we don't want him to throw the more interceptions, but take a little bit more risk. And as he gets more comfortable, I think that's going to also be pairing with the wide receivers to really help them out.
Yeah, Alex Smith has made his money and has made his reputation on being careful with the ball. We talked about it last week. The guy's only thrown like 12 interceptions the last 2 seasons. I think it was like 19 the last 3 seasons or something like that. Obviously, he's not the gunslinger Matt Stafford, Brett Favre type, that's gonna just throw it into triple coverage, but he doesn't have a guy named Megatron playing for him either. Where if Calvin Johnson is a Kansas City Chief, I think you'd see a lot more of that. But oh, God, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, let's make that happen.
Yeah. What does that trade worth? But no, I think, I think you're right, and I think that it's definitely evident, and I think it became more evident at the end of last season. As much as it does pain me, I have watched that Chiefs-Colts playoff game several times since January, and By the way, this is not an endorsement for the NFL, but listeners, if you haven't invested, I highly recommend the NFL Rewind. Just because you can go back on your tablet or your laptop and rewatch games, you can watch the coach's cam. It's really quite a cool thing, and it's only $25 for the whole season. You get all the games, so it's pretty neat. But anyway, yeah, I just I think that in that game especially, we saw a lot of what Alex Smith could be as the quarterback of this team versus what he had been for the entire season, and what kind of a receiver Dwayne Bowe could be for this team, and as opposed to what he had been for the whole season, which is one of the worst seasons of his career. I mean, in all honesty, and he was okay with that. He's the highest paid, or one of the highest paid guys on the team. He's the third highest paid receiver in the NFL as of when he got that contract last year. And there was 2 games. One game he had 4 yards receiving, and another game he had 7 yards receiving. That's not okay.
No, it's not. Especially when, I mean, he has to be, especially our red zone threat. He has to be that person that can go and post up and, pull down those balls and get touchdowns, and he hasn't been that. So, we need him. We need that, and then that's where the tight ends come in too. We can't always depend on Jamaal Charles scoring 5 touchdowns a game and being that guy. But yeah, I mean, and then the more we get that, the more we get the wide receivers, the more we get the tight ends and stuff like that really locked down. I mean, you got to hope too. I mean, look at what Jamaal Charles is doing without that. So if he has that and we have that threat going, it's just gonna be a leagues and bounds difference for opening up stuff for hopefully Jamaal Charles too.
Yeah, absolutely. And whereas we don't want Dwayne Bowe to repeat the season he had, we can only hope that Jamaal Charles repeats the season that he had. And I don't know. I mean, I think it's going to be tough for the guy to go another season where he's got almost 2,000 yards from scrimmage, almost 20 touchdowns in 15 games. I mean, I'm a firm believer that had Charles, had the Chiefs played that Week 17 game, their starters against San Diego, that Charles would have ended up with over 2,000 yards from scrimmage, both receiving and rushing, and probably at least 20 touchdowns. Ken Charles, does he got? I mean, you think he's going to do it again? You think it's going to be another banner year for JC25?
Well, here's the deal. It's what Andy Reid likes to do. If you have a guy that can put up, those kind of reps and, has the ability to run the ball as consistently as he runs the ball, and then also pop out and have the hands and the ability and route running to, pull off the screens and the little third, inside routes that they do with him. And Andy Reid loves doing that. He did that in Philly. He made me happy a few years in a row drafting LaShawn McCoy on my fantasy team because he would run the ball, get running touchdowns, get the passing touchdowns. And it's the exact same thing. It's why Bo was Fantasy Player of the Year.
Charles fantasy.
I'm sorry, not Bo. Yeah, Charles.
Bo screwed me on my fantasy league last year.
I didn't pick up Bo last year. I knew that was happening. But when you can go in and get those rushing touchdowns and receiving touchdowns, and like I said, and that's with our wide receivers putting up, very dismal numbers. So if we can open that up and keep him going, I think he has the ability to, do just as well. Definitely. I mean, I don't know if the passing will be as high. I mean, those were pretty outstanding numbers. If you go back and look, I mean, that's triple the stats of any other year he's ever had, with the touchdowns and the yardage. So, I mean, I don't know if you'll expect exactly as high as that, especially if we're going to try and work in our receivers a little bit more, but it's definitely going to open up stuff. It's going to open up, I think, the bigger playabilities rather than, just the probably not as many plays, but the bigger plays.
I'm curious to get your take on this. Talking about him repeating this again, what's your opinion? And this is here's where I'm at. I want to see Nile Davis more. Now that the Chiefs have drafted DeAnthony Thomas, the Black Mamba, I want to see him more. I would even be okay with, if Cyrus Gray makes this roster, if the Chiefs hold on to 4 running backs, mix them all in there. And this is why, because JC is not getting any younger. That guy, 2,000 yards last year, he's already blown an ACL, which, I mean, it's amazing what the doctors can do nowadays for him to come back and perform like he has when other guys, I mean, it's an eventual career ender for him. What do you think? I mean, do you think that Reed needs to go to a bit more of a 70-30, 60-40? Or do you think that the 90-10 or the 85-15 is okay?
I think it's hard to. I think it's hard to, if you see Jamaal Charles putting up the production that he puts up, and he's been fairly healthy. I mean, besides that 1 year, and he had the concussion at the end of last year, which, who knows how bad that would have been.
Yeah, that's a freak. That's a freak thing, though. I mean, that's one of those things that it's like you just can't even predict that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I was talking Chiefs with a couple of buddies of mine, that year after Charles got hurt, they were like, well, yeah, if Charles stays healthy. And I was just like, what are you talking about? Charles hasn't injured all through his college career, hasn't injured all through his pro year. That's the very first time he's ever been injured and missed games. So, I mean, I think he's fairly, able to take those high reps and performing that. I mean, when you see the numbers he put up last year, it's hard to put. I mean, I want to see what other guys can do too, but how can you? How can you, take the chance when that 20 touchdowns a year is sitting off the field, So what I'm hoping they do is they take some of those guys like DeAnthony Thomas and, see what they can do in other realms, you know what I'm saying? Use Charles as your kind of main 1-2, still throw the screens to him and stuff like that, get him the ball, but work some of those other guys in secondary positions. Let's put them out. The guys who can catch. Let's move them out. And run some different inside routes. Let's get them out in the flat and see what they can do, and use them as secondary weapons to Charles.
It's kind of crazy in talking about Jamaal Charles and this Chiefs team in general. Really and truly, for the past, we'll say 14 years, this team has had an elite running back, all the way back to the days of Priest Holmes and picking him up as a free agent from the Baltimore Ravens. Holmes goes down, Larry Johnson, as much as we don't really like Larry Johnson around these parts anymore and kind of the douche that he turned into, but he makes his emergence, Larry Johnson comes out of favor, and here's this guy that the Chiefs had drafted in the 3rd round in Jamaal Charles. And now, Jamaal Charles, the end of last season, he gets hurt, and Niall Davis steps up, and out of nowhere, this dude's scoring a couple touchdowns and almost 100 yards.
I mean, there's a big difference though between someone we've seen very little from Niall Davis. He had the one good game and he's shown some flashes, but there's a difference between something like that and saying he's consistent enough to really put in and give some solid reps to.
So you don't think Davis is the eventual replacement for Charles?
No, I'm sure he probably will be. I just, like I said, I don't know if he's going to be Priest Holmes or Jamaal Charles.
But we didn't know that Jamaal Charles was going to be Larry Johnson. You know what I mean? So that's all I'm getting at.
No, I mean, he definitely has potential. I mean, he's a talented guy. But, I don't think that you can start giving him Jamaal Charles reps when Jamaal Charles is performing these last 2 years, he's performing the best he has his entire career.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm just concerned.
At their peak.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not even necessarily saying sit Charles. I don't know. I mean, I got what you're saying. I really do. I'm trying to think, how can the Chiefs keep Charles for as long as possible without really just blowing all the tread off the tire? And I think since they have such a strong backfield with Niall Davis showing that he can shoulder some of that load. that maybe you back off a little bit. If Charles is getting 90% of the carries, maybe you back that off to 85% or 80%. I mean, I get it. You don't want to leave 20 touchdowns sitting on the bench, but
yeah. No, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think they do need to step back on Charles, but what I'm hoping happens, the way they do that, is if they push out some of that, their plays and get other people involved in different positions, like you were saying with the wide receivers, it's going to open up less touches for Charles, but bigger plays for Charles, which is where we really need to get him to be. And, I think, like I said, I don't think his passing stats are going to be anywhere they were last year. I think they will still pass him the screen and stuff like that. But unless our wide receivers just absolutely no-show again this year, which I'm hoping doesn't happen, I think you're going to see quite a bit of decrease in them, using him in the passing game as much. And they're still doing it because, I mean, that's Andy Reid offense, but they were going to it for too much. We didn't have tight ends, we didn't have wide receivers, so it was like not only was 90% Charles in the running back position, but it was 90% Charles in the offensive position.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, all joking aside, he was responsible by himself for 40% of the offense last year. I mean, that's huge when you consider that there's the quarterback and usually 4 other receivers on the field or whatever. I mean, it's insane. Wow. Yeah, it's insane that he covered that much. So.
And then, what was really funny is I mentioned it last week, but I was just watching. They had Super Bowl 23 playing on the NFL Network the other day, and so it was the 49ers against Cincinnati, that game. And it was such a, it was these two just super high-end elite offenses, and they came in and neither of them really looked like elite offenses in that game. But anyways, when I was watching it, going back and remembering all that, and I was watching Roger Craig, and he looked so much like Jamaal Charles to me, where they were just using him as their offense. They were like, first down, run the ball to Craig. Second down, run the ball off tackle to Craig. Third down, throw the screen to Craig. And it just reminded me of that Chiefs offense where it was just like, oh, let's see how many different ways we can get Jamaal Charles the ball.
Yeah, it's there are similarities there, but then again, there you go. I mean, with the West Coast offense, that's kind of where it's based on. But you just said something, and it kind of made me laugh. If you think about the issues that this Chiefs team had last year, that their tight ends, both of their starting tight ends were hurt at one point in time. I mean, Kelsey was brought in to be the next Rob Gronkowski or next Tony Gonzalez. Fasano was going to be the stalwart veteran. Both of them go down with injuries, and you're at a point where you're stuck with a nobody named Sean McGrath, who, as Tara said, came in and was a very reliable guy. A good
bowing out.
Glass jaw Joe there, Tony Moeaki, or glass knee, whatever he had. But and I feel for that guy too, because I thought he was going to be the real deal when he was drafted. So. But no, my point is that you talk about that, you talk about the receivers no-show, and you talk about the and it's amazing to me that the Chiefs won 11 games last year. Like, it really is. That Jamaal Charles is just that damn good, that he was able to literally say, "Don't worry, guys, I got this on my back. Here we go." So pretty interesting, but. It gives me hope for this year. With the new season comes new hope that. Everybody's back healthy, and what the Chiefs won 11 games last year with just Charles. Really, what are they going to be able to do this year? If when they have the tight ends back and healthy, they've got hopefully renewed juice at the receiver position. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, the big thing here is you also got to remember. There's injuries last year, but there's going to be injuries this year. You know what I'm saying? Like, injuries, that's an ongoing thing. And so, some of these guys are probably going to be hurt again. But you got to hope. I hope at least some of that injury stays away from tight end position, because Alex Smith has shown with previous stuff in San Francisco, he works really well with tight ends, especially in the red zone. So, you have somebody with the physical ability of Kelsey, and then you have somebody with the red zone ability of Fasano, where he's been known, he was that guy to catch touchdowns. That's all he did. And if we have those guys on our team and use them to the ability to do that, I mean, it should open some stuff up for Alex Smith. Hopefully, that's what I'm really banking on, is having tight ends really kind of open up our offense a little bit.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, I think that the tight end position is going to be huge for this team this year. I really do. I mean, I was excited. Honestly, I was excited for the Fasano signing. I liked him when he played in Miami. In fact, I really looked at his stuff, and I think his last year in Miami, he caught 5 touchdowns, and all 5 touchdowns that he caught that season were in the red zone. Talking about being your red zone threat. Kelsey, you watch his tape from college, I mean, you can't help but just go, oh,
yes,
come on, be healthy. Come on, because he's just, I mean, he is impressive. He's got the...
Killing me, you can't, it sucks to have somebody with his ability just not being there. If he goes down again this year, it's going to be the Moeaki story. It's going to be that we just have to get rid of him strictly because we need to put a body in there. We need someone who can, if that's Sean McGrath or if that's, some no-name guy out there who at least can, stay healthy. That's huge.
It is, and a lot of this stuff's going to start shaking itself out next month. Training camp convenes. The Chiefs have released their training camp schedule. It starts about a month from now, July 21st. I think quarterbacks and rookies report, and then July 23rd, the rest of the team vets show up. It's like a Wednesday, and then they go from there all the way up through August. So, as I mentioned to Therese, I will be at training camp this year. My first Chiefs training camp ever. I'm pretty excited about that. Mrs. Chief Central Radio, my wife, is being the cool wife that she is, has said, yeah, let's take a little road trip. We're going to do a little Seibel family adventure and head north to St. Joe. It's about a 12-hour drive for us. So, unfortunately, my man Chris won't be able to make it, but not this year. Next year.
We're gonna try and get down to a game though this year.
Yeah, that's the
figure that out.
Plan. Yeah, we're gonna figure out a game that we can get to and maybe do an episode of Chief Central Radio live from the tailgate party.
Live drunk from the tailgate.
It's something else, man. I mean, it's coming up quick. I was talking to my brother. I was just visiting with him this past weekend, and I was like, man, I can't wait. Football season's only 72 days away or whatever. And he looks at me, and he's a football fan. He lives in Chicago, so. He's kind of a Bears fan. He's lived all over, so he kind of just goes where he lives. But he said, man, yeah, but if you want football season to get here so fast, you're gonna miss the whole summer. And I say, it doesn't even matter, dude. It doesn't even matter because you know what? What's summer? It's a month and a half that I gotta wait until there's news again. So.
Plus, you're in Texas. It's summer 24/7 down there.
That's a fact. It is warm down here for sure. So, I think we're just about out of time for this week, there, Chiefs fans. I definitely want to give a big thank you to Mr. Terrace Paler from the Kansas City Star for joining us this week. His insight was definitely top notch. I really appreciate that. Definitely working on more and more. Guests to bring on as we progress through this offseason into the season. Duff, final thoughts, my friend?
No, I'm just excited. I'm excited to see how this kind of pans out. And like I said, this kind of empty, you're saying at the darkness of the football time period right now where there's kind of going to this empty thing, I'm excited just to kind of get around the corner a little bit and see some of that, see where some of these guys pan out. It was awesome having someone like Terrence that has kind of the firsthand view. I'm jealous, being able to kind of go down there and see some of that. I really can't wait to see how things pan out and for the preseason and getting the guys signed on and see what the roster's looking like.
Yeah, I mean, being Chiefs fans, at least, maybe we've got a little bit of news to look forward to in this next month of no news in that, hopefully we're going to hear news about a Houston signing. We're going to hear news maybe about a Smith signing. There's going to be some of that. The Chiefs have 2 spots on their roster. As of right now, they've got 88 players. They're allowed to have 90 going into camp. So there may be some roster moves of some kind there. But other than that, not a lot of news. Just kind of an administrative note, Chiefs fans, and again, thank you for listening to this episode of Chiefs Central Radio. We are on iTunes. We do ask if you're listening on iTunes, to go in, give us a rating, give us a 5-star rating, and give us a good review to help boost our rating there on the iTunes store, which will help this podcast show up more visible for other viewers. We are, so as of this episode, also available on Stitcher Radio. So if you're listening on Stitcher, or if you want to know more about that, go to Stitcher.com, search Chiefs Central Radio, and if you could give us a thumbs up on Stitcher Radio, as well as a good review there as well, to make this podcast more visible for other Chiefs fans to find, and take a listen and hear what we've got to say. We've got a lot more coming up this season. One way that you can follow us, Chris has assured me today that he is going to be more visible on Twitter. His Twitter handle is Gully, Gully, as Duff, Duff. Gully is Duff. And, of course, you can find me at JF Bel. Make sure you're following our show Twitter handle, which is Radio Chiefs on Twitter. It's the best way to interact with us. I think start next week we might open up some questions and see what you folks want to hear us talk about as we roll through Chiefs Central Radio. So, for my good friend Chris Kilduff up in the Pacific Northwest, Spokane, Washington, I'm Jason Seibel down in San Antonio, Texas, telling you keep it red, keep it yellow, always keep it Chiefs.